Benjamin Netanyahu issued a scathing threat to Hamas, implying that, he's about to go scorch earth since they haven't kept their promises. So I'm going to do a thorough body language and statement analysis of his words to see what he really meant and, most important, the way that he wants to frame his message. Hello and welcome back, my body language buddies. My name is Jesus Enrique Rosas. I'm the body language guy, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you don't miss any of my body language analysis and tips. Let's get down to it. I want to make it clear that this video is neither criticism or endorsement of his message. I might ask a couple questions to see what you think, though. So let's go play by play, and I will be talking about his rhetoric and his body language as well.
Hamas is responsible for this war. It invaded our towns, murdered our people, raped our women, and kidnapped our loved ones.
So his first words are, Hamas is responsible for this war. It invaded our towns, murdered our people, raped our women, and kidnapped our loved ones. The most important theme in this opening is the attribution of the blame to Hamas. He frames Hamas as the sole instigator, accusing them of initiating the war through violent acts and establishing a moral dichotomy. Israel is the victim and Hamas is the aggressor. He uses vivid graphic language such as murder, raped, and kidnapped. That is a very strong emotional appeal. He evokes outrage and empathy, humanizing the Israel experience and demonizing Hamas. What he wants to do with this very brief opening is just that, dehumanize Hamas, and in turn justifying extreme measures against them. You can see from his body language, he has a very high contrast red tie, which of course is in many ways the color of war, and he's flanked by the Israel flag with a bright blue background. That blue background can be a message of peace at the same time, a request for peace. And he's also wearing a yellow ribbon pin, which is, I guess, and in this context represents the people who haven't come back to Israel, the hostages that have not been released. I see a lot of gravitas in his body language, in the way that he tilts his head down, and he makes sure to look straight into the camera, and he uses both symmetric and asymmetrical hand gestures. Notice that the way that he stares into the camera when he says, rape our women. He wants to add weight to that statement. I'm going to zoom in so you can see much better his facial expression in this one. It's important because that's the way that he wants to add gravitas to his speech. So he wants to add weight to that statement, demonstrating that he is concerned about it. Again, that is what his body language is projecting.
Hamas refused offer after offer to release our hostages.
Now he says that Hamas refused offer after offer to release our hostages. He's gone from that emotional appeal to justify military action. He highlights Hamas' intransigence. He suggests that Israel has pursued peace, but that hasn't exactly worked. So he's essentially framing military action as a last resort. Like, my hands are tied, this is what I must do. That is a rhetorical strategy which is appealing to a logical argumentation. It's a cause and effect narrative. Hamas' refusal has triggered Israel's response. That is laying the groundwork for later military action. Notice that in this case, he uses a symmetric gesture of both hands appealing to the viewer, to who's watching the video. It's the kind of gesture that you use when you want to make a case, and is in, I'm appealing to you, I need your support. Let's watch that gesture again. That one, right there. You know, it's both hands pointing at the viewer, at us. It's like I'm appealing to you right now. I'm appealing to your understanding of what is going on. So you're going to see that the need for support is going to be a motive later on.
In the past 2 weeks, Israel did not initiate any military action in the hope that Hamas would change course.
Now he says, in the past 2 weeks, Israel did not initiate any military action in the hope that Hamas would change course. Again, this is a justification of military action. He is presenting Israel as restrained, pausing military operations to give Hamas a chance and reinforcing the narrative that he was reluctant to escalate. So he's appealing to presenting himself and Israel as a moral authority, looking to build Israel's credibility as a principled actor, countering accusations of aggression. Again, as I'm telling you, when you have only 2 minutes to make a statement, you want to make sure you use every second possible, because every second counts. Notice that in the body language department, to protect his moral authority, he opens up his arms a little. He does it in this moment right there. He tries to appear bigger in the frame, and his body takes this kind of shape in a triangle with a wider base, as in, we are resolved to do this.
Well, that didn't happen. While Israel accepted the offer of President Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff.
Then he says, well, that didn't happen while Israel accepted the offer of President Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff. He expresses those words, that didn't happen, with kind of haste, with that asymmetrical gesture with his left hand, and reinforces the narrative that Israel is shown as cooperative compared to Hamas' constant refusal. And he makes sure to mention Trump's envoy because he wants to signal reliance on U.S. backing, and in turn appealing to all allies who value this partnership. It is like, okay, the United States is with us. Who else is? Again, he keeps the rhetorical strategy of a contrast between Israel's acceptance and Hamas' refusal, but reinforces that cause and effect justification of force.
Hamas flatly refused to do so. And this is why I authorized yesterday the renewal of military action against Hamas.
Hamas flatly refused to do so. This is why I authorized yesterday the renewal of military action against Hamas. Notice that when he says the words flatly refused to do so, he does this double chopping gesture with his hands. He's just making sure to signal that there was nothing they could do because Hamas has already refused to negotiate or release the hostages, which in turn is going to be the trigger for the military actions that he is announcing right now. Notice that he uses the words, this is why, as in cause and effect. The words, this is why, make sure to link Hamas behavior or actions with his military actions, as in one thing precedes the other, making sure to justify once more these renewed attacks on Hamas.
Israel does not target Palestinian civilians. We target Hamas terrorists.
Israel does not target Palestinian civilians, we target Hamas terrorists. Body language was pretty clear. When he says Palestinian civilians, he opens his hands and shows his palms. So this is a harmless gesture. We greet Palestinian civilians. And when he says we target Hamas terrorists, he uses a pinch gesture with his index finger, very right on point. With his body language, he wants to portray or convey the concept of we are not launching bombs indiscriminately. We're going to laser focus on Hamas terrorists. It not only makes the distinction between civilians and terrorists, but also appeals to him being a moral authority. We are not going to harm Palestinian civilians. But there's a caveat that you're going to find out in a minute.
And when these terrorists embed themselves in civilian areas, when they use civilians as human shields, they're the ones who are responsible for all unintended casualties.
This one is important. And when these terrorists embed themselves in civilian areas, you remember that he had made a distinction between terrorists and civilians, and now he's saying that terrorists embed themselves in civilian areas. When they use civilians as human shields, they are the ones who are responsible for all unintended casualties. So he's shifting the responsibility from Israel to Hamas, blaming civilian casualties on Hamas' strategy of using human shields. And this is also a way to explain any unintended deaths of civilians by maintaining Israel's claim that they target only terrorists, that Hamas and terrorists are to blame for civilian casualties. He makes sure to use repetition and emphasis with the same gesture. They are the ones who are responsible. Now, this is the thing that I told you was the caveat. But before we find out about that caveat, I want to invite you to my merch store in the description of this video, where you will find all my shirts, hoodies, mugs, stickers, everything that you want about my channel. So make sure to visit.
Palestinian civilians should avoid any contact with Hamas terrorists. And I call on the people of Gaza, get out of harm's way, move to safer areas, because every civilian casualty is a tragedy.
Palestinian civilians should avoid any contact with Hamas terrorists, move to safer areas because every civilian casualty is a tragedy. I only have a question out of ignorance. Where are Palestinian civilians going to move to? How are they going to get out of harm's way? Because nobody knows exactly where is harm's way, since according to Netanyahu himself, Hamas blends in civilians precisely because of that. So how would civilians know where is out of harm's way? It is just my question. He uses another emotional appeal with the words, every civilian casualty is a tragedy, which adds solemnity, but what he's doing is making sure to balance the aggressive tone with concern. The problem is that by advising civilians to move, Israel deflects blame for casualties on those who don't comply or are supporting Hamas. Again, I see it a bit too simplistic. Move out of harm's way, but what is harm's way exactly?
And every civilian casualty is the fault of Hamas.
And every civilian casualty is the fault of Hamas. This is reiterating that Hamas bears full responsibility for civilian deaths, and by contrast, that Israel is completely innocent of collateral damage. I wish it was that simple.
I thank President Trump for his unwavering support for Israel. Our alliance with the United States has never been stronger.
I thank President Trump for his unwavering support of Israel. Our alliance with the United States has never been stronger. Notice that he assumes a pyramid body language again. Make sure to look bigger, to look more powerful, as in that alliance where the United States makes Israel really strong. And it's a second appeal to international support, not only from the United States, but appealing for the support of other allies that recognize that support from the United States. Now, the following part is critical.
To those who criticize Israel, I ask, what would you do if terrorists murdered and kidnapped your children? You would do what we are doing.
To those who criticize Israel, I ask, what would you do if terrorists murder and kidnapped your children? You would do what we are doing. The most important thing here, he's talking to you directly, the viewer, saying, if somebody murdered and kidnapped your children, what would you do? And he answers that hypothetical question himself. You would do what we are doing. So these words, he is trying to deflect any possible criticism by appealing to your stance in a hypothetical scenario. What would you do? How would you act? You will act in self-defense. So that's what Israel is doing. Again, he is using very short sentences, very strong ideas, but at the same time can sound a bit too simplistic. By the way, with his body language, notice that when he does this appeal to people, what would you do? He uses the same gesture that he used a few seconds ago. I'm going to show you this. Make sure. There it is. You see that? With both hands pointing towards the camera. What would you do? He's pointing his hands toward the viewer.
In the face of pure evil, free societies have no choice but to fight.
In the face of pure evil, free societies have no choice but to fight. Now, he is not mentioning terrorists. He is not mentioning Hamas. He's saying pure evil. Because Israel is a free society, he's appealing to democratic values, he's enhancing moral credibility, and he's making sure to completely dehumanize Hamas. Not only not mentioning them directly, but addressing them as pure evil. That eliminates any possibility of negotiation, framing Hamas as, an entity that has to be eradicated. I found it interesting that in this part of his speech, he didn't use asymmetric gesture. He didn't emphasize with one hand or the other. He used symmetric gestures, as in making it more important to appeal to all those free societies, to appeal to all those allies besides the United States to support Israel in this.
So I want to assure all our friends around the world, Israel will fight and Israel will win.
So I want to assure all your friends around the world, Israel will fight and Israel will win. The key theme here is resolve and victory. He's making a promise of victory that reassures both domestic and international audiences of Israel's strength. We will win. Is it that simple? I don't know. And he uses a rhetorical strategy of repetition and emphasis. Israel will fight and Israel will win.
We will bring our people home and we will destroy Hamas. We will not relent until we achieve all these vital goals.
We will bring our people home and we will destroy Hamas. We will not relent until we achieve all these vital goals. He's making a specific goal, such as returning hostages and destroying Hamas, with a vow to persist. This is like wrapping up the whole speech, and you remember that he had projected resolve earlier. Now he says, we will not relent. In fact, he uses the words destroy Hamas. He already said that Hamas is pure evil, and now it's like an irredeemable threat that requires total elimination. I found it interesting that right at the end of that section, he pressed his lips, a thing that he hadn't done many times over this very short speech. I'm going to show you with a quick zoom right there. He's pressing his lips. It's interesting. This one moment that he did that. There's just a hint of covert anger in that last part.
And we will not rest until we give our country a future of peace, prosperity, and hope.
And we will not rest until we give our country a future of peace, prosperity, and hope. Again, there's this theme of resolve and victory that tries to balance all the aggression that he has expressed with a positive outcome. We will have peace, prosperity, and hope. Those words, peace, prosperity, and hope, are plain and simple another emotional appeal. They try to inspire, to uplift, appeal to long-term aspirations. That's the way that you speak when you want people to support you. You speak in an emotional way. In general, the overall tone and delivery focuses on accusatory, on one hand, blaming Hamas, of course, and then switches to defensive, justifying actions, cause and effect. And in the end, a promise of victory. Again, I am not endorsing or criticizing his words. I am just trying to describe why did he choose those words. What was he trying to convey and how his body language was following what he said. In all cases, the underlying message is Hamas made us do this. And what is this? Well, whatever they are about to do, I guess. But I would like to know what do you think about this in the comments. Remember to download my 100 body language tips right in the description of this video. My name is Jesus Enrique Rosas. I'm the body language guy. Much love and bliss.